Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Ken, for that great prayer. Steve, appreciate you, brother, but we need to teach you your colors. Just kidding. Just kidding. Love you and appreciate you. Tonight I want us to spend time talking about developing a good or developing a positive attitude. Before we get to that, I told you this morning my sweet wife was down in West Tennessee, and so she wasn't there to remind me. I forgot to mention and to say and to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I know the pandemic and the quarantine, it's kind of set us all back, but whatever your plans are, I hope that they're a success, and I hope that you are able to enjoy the day and count it a blessing, because it is a blessing from God. But let us talk about tonight how do you develop a good attitude? How do you develop a positive attitude? Story's told of a lady one time that woke up one morning, she looked in the mirror, and she noticed that she only had 3 hairs on her head. She said, well, I think I'll braid my hair today, and so she did, and she had a wonderful day. She went to bed, and the next morning she woke up, she looked in the mirror, and she noticed she only had 2 hairs. She thought for a minute. She said, I think I'll part my hair in the middle today. And so she did, and she had a great day. The next day, she woke up after her night slumber, and she looked in the mirror, and she noticed that she only had 1 hair. So she said, well, I think I'll wear it in a ponytail today. And so she did, and she had a great day. The next day, she woke up, and she looked in the mirror, and she saw that there wasn't a single hair on her head. And so she said, I don't have to fix my hair today. What a great day. Attitude's everything, isn't it? Didn't matter what was going to happen to her, she was going to be happy. It's kind of hard sometimes to have a positive, to have a good frame of mind, a good attitude. We understand that the word attitude means a state of mind or a disposition towards something or someone. And in this case, towards life and towards all the events of life. But because of the pandemic, really, it's caused a lot of us to just be cranky, just be crabby, a little irritable, a little fussy, a little, maybe if you will, a little hard to please, a little difficult to get along with. And yet, the Bible really tells us that we really need to have a positive attitude, a good attitude. And while it may be difficult, and it may be difficult in this time and even at this season of the year, let me share with you what I believe are some keys, some traits, some things that you need to incorporate into your life. Because attitude, when you really get down to it, is a choice. You choose whether to be happy or you choose whether to be grumpy. And sometimes we don't see ourselves as we really are. But the reality of it is that if we look inside ourselves, we can tell whether we're a happy person or not a very happy person. But how do you go about developing a good outlook on life, a good outlook towards events in your life, a good outlook towards what's going on in life? Well, let's think about those things this evening. And if you want to, write these things down. I think that they would prove beneficial to you in the long run. First of all, learn to look at the good side of things. And maybe we even rephrase that to learn to look on the good side of all things. You know, events have 2 sides. Look at your gas tank. Let me ask you, is it half full or half empty? How do you look at it? Do you look at it as being half full or half empty? Is the glass half full or half empty? That determines really how you look at life. And with events in our life having 2 sides, attitude affects how we see those events. I'll give you a for instance. This happened in a congregation that I was with at the time. It was summertime. Someone had cranked the air conditioner down a little bit because the auditorium was a little warm. And so they'd cranked it down a little bit. And one lady walked out and she talked about how beautiful the service was, how wonderful the service was. The singing was tremendous, appreciated the preaching, appreciated everything. And as a few people walked out, there's another lady who walked out and said, I tell you what, if we turn the air conditioner down like that again, I will never be back. This was the most miserable time. I am miserable. I did not appreciate anything. And she walked out. Well, she was back the next service. She was one of those individuals that was going to be there anytime the door was open. But nevertheless, that was her, if you will, that was her crabbiness coming out. She failed to look on the good side of how wonderful the worship was because of what she believed to be an air conditioner problem. Well, how's your glass? Is your glass of tea half full? Is your glass of tea half empty? Is life handing you good things, or is life handing you bad things? And even in the bad things, are they really good? Well, that part of this point I'm going to leave for next Sunday morning. We'll conclude our series on Thank You, Lord, and we're going to look at Thank You, Lord, for my thorns. How do you look at those thorns? How do you look at those problems? Well, how do you look at things? The decisions that you make are often affected by the attitudes that you have, and the attitudes that you have color the way you see the event in your life. You often see why people did what they did and what they did to you based upon how you view life. What are your attitudes? If your attitude is good, you try to give them the benefit of the doubt. You try to say, okay, didn't like this, didn't like what they did, didn't like the choice that they made, but nevertheless, maybe they had a reason for it. You try to look on the good side. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 7, makes the statement, to judge not, that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you use, it shall be measured back to you. Why do you look at the speck? And then he talks about your brother, the speck in the brother's eye and the beam within your own eye. But he makes the statement in verses 1 and 2. Judge not that you be not judged. Be careful, for with what judgment you cast upon others, it will be cast upon you. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 1 through 10, Paul talked about the church. And he looked at some of the good events of the church. But it's very hard to look on the good side. In Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20, you might recall the story there. Joseph had been sold, basically he'd been sold into slavery by his brothers. He ended up in prison, of course. He was let out of prison based upon the ability to interpret dreams, even though he had really been forgotten by the baker who he had told, remember me when you get to Pharaoh's house. He had forgotten him. Later, when the king wanted his dream interpreted, the baker said, oh yeah, I remember a fellow. His name's Joseph. They came and got him, and of course Joseph interpreted the dream and then later was put in charge of making preparations for famine. He was later reunited with his brothers. He was reunited with his father. And when his father dies and his brothers come to him, they want to make peace. They tell him this story about how Dad really always wanted us to be back together again. And Joseph calms them down in Genesis 50 and verse 20. And he says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. By the actions, really, Joseph was able to save his brothers' lives eventually. Took time. That story, we read it in a matter of maybe minutes or maybe even an hour or two, but it took years for that story to develop. You see, he looked upon it, and he looked upon it as a good thing. If you contrast in the Bible, you contrast the 10 spies. You remember the 12 spies that went into the land of Canaan to search out the land to see what they could do, whether they could conquer the land? There are 10 spies that came back and said what? Oh, we're grasshoppers in the land of giants. We're little folks. They brought, clusters of grapes. They had to carry a stave or put a stave or a rod in between the cluster of grapes, and 2 men carrying the cluster of grapes. Look here. We're little fellows. We can't take over these giants. And it is said that those 10 individuals melted the heart of the people. But it is said of the other two, Joshua and Caleb, that there was another spirit about them. And it was a spirit of optimism. It was a spirit of, yes, we can, and we can with the Lord's help. You see, they didn't say, I don't think we can do this. They said, man, why not? It's sort of like the story of David killing the giant Goliath. Goliath was too big for anybody to take on, but for David, Goliath was too big to miss. Difference in attitude. Difference in how you look at it. But there was a positive attitude, if you will, amongst the two spies that came back and said, oh, we can do it. There was not with the 10 that said we can't. These 12 individuals were all looking at the same thing. You see, it's a difference of choosing the good side versus the bad, the positive versus the negative. You remember the 5-talent man, the 2-talent man, the 1-talent man? It's a great story, isn't it? The 5-talent man gains 5 more talents. 2-talent man gains 2 more talents. The 1-talent man, though, do you remember what he is? Now, admittedly, all 3 men had the same master. But the 1-talent man said, I was afraid, and I went and I hid my talent. He said, I knew that you were a hard man. He said, I knew that you gathered where you had not strong. I knew that you were going to be exacting on me. I still believe that wonderful story teaches many things, but one of the things that it teaches is look on the good side. The 5-talent man, boy, they had 5, let's gain 5 more. The 2-talent man, let's put it to work, let's gain 2 more. We need to remember what the psalmist said in Psalm 37. Verse 3, trust in the Lord, do good, dwell in the land, and feed on His, talking about God's faithfulness. Verse 4, delight yourself also in the Lord, and He shall give the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in Him, and He'll bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday. Look on the good side. Story told of a little boy that was sitting in the principal's office. He'd had a very bad day, you might say. Little fellow was sitting there. The boy had cut his hand while out recess in the morning. He'd also knocked out 2 teeth and broke his arm that afternoon. And he's sitting in the principal's arm waiting for his parents to come get him. And the principal notices in the little boy's hand there's clutched something, and he says, son, what have you got? And he says, well, I found a quarter on the playground. I've never found a quarter. It's my lucky day. It's all in how you look at it, isn't it? Trust in the Lord. Commit your way unto Him, and He'll bring it to pass. But then secondly, you want to develop a good attitude? Learn to get over it. Learn to get over it. Now, some people have the ability to get over things better than others. Some people, they get upset and it eats on them for days on end. But some people, they simply have something happen to them. Somebody says something to them. Somebody does something to them. And they have this wonderful ability to just move on. While others hold grudges against themselves and grudges against God and against others. And they'll cry out, it's not fair. And they'll sit and they'll pout. The Bible really teaches us, move on, move forward. Don't get caught in a grudge. Don't get caught in hating something that is past. Just simply put, get over it. Move on. Move forward. God has really given us the remedy for the problem for those that want to sit and pout and be upset. With regards to personal relationships, Matthew 18, Jesus says, if your brother sins against you, you go to him, you talk to him, and if he will not listen to you, you do what? You carry 2 or 3 witnesses. Jesus said you talk to people. Paul wrote in Romans chapter 12, you don't recompense evil for evil. You provide for things honest in the sight of all men. If your enemy hungers, you feed him. If he thirsts, you give him water to drink. You do what? You get over it. The psalmist said it this way, talking about the evildoer or the person that does you evil. In Psalm 37 and verse 1, he says, do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the workers of iniquity. And then verse 8, he says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Don't fret. It'll only cause harm. You see, the Bible tells us that we need to learn to get over it. That we need to learn to simply let it go. And while it may be hard at times, it is the principle that God taught. In the book of Numbers, the 12th chapter, there's a story. It's an interesting story. It's a story, really, you might say, between three people, but God is right there in the middle of it. Miriam and Aaron, in Numbers chapter 12, verse 1, spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman that he had married. And while they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? The Lord heard it. And what did the Lord do? Well, he rebuked Aaron and Miriam for speaking against Moses. He basically tells them, hey, look, Moses is a prophet of God. Moses is a speaker for God. Moses is God's man. Don't bother Moses. And yet, when God finished speaking, Miriam turned white as leprous. She became almost like a leper, and her leprosy was white. And Aaron called to Moses and said, hey, can't you do something about it? And Moses then, of course, cried out, verse 13 of Numbers 12, to the Lord. And his cry was, please heal her, O God, I pray. He was over it. He was over it. And so for a period of time, she remained leprous because God heard the prayer of Moses, and then she was made whole again. You see, he could have sat and he could have been upset, and he could have called out, and he could have called out Moses and Miriam, and he could have talked about how that they were unfair and how that they shouldn't have talked about him and how they shouldn't have done this and done that, but he got over it. Now, that's not easy, is it? Remember Jesus, though, who when he was reviled did not revile in return when he suffered. But he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 23. For if your enemy blesses you, he tells you, or he says, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Get over it. Philippians 3, Paul says, forgetting the things that are behind. Now, in that context, Paul was talking about successes and also where he had come from. But it's the same idea. Learn to get over it. Abraham Lincoln told a story once when he was practicing law that he was approached by an individual, and he was passionate about bringing a lawsuit for $2.50 against a debtor that was broke, was impoverished. There was no way that he could pay the $2.50, but this man wanted to make sure that he paid his debt. And so Lincoln tried to discourage the man from the lawsuit. He said, it's only an act of revenge. There's no need in it. He can't pay you. Let's just drop the whole thing. But the man wouldn't be put off. And so Lincoln looked at the man and he said, I tell you what, he said, I'll take your case, but it will cost you $10. If you'll pay me $10, I'll get your money back. Well, the plaintiff was so glad that he gave Lincoln his fee of $10. And so Lincoln then took of those $10, he took the $2.50, he gave it to the debtor. He told him, he said, now you pay your debt off with this. And the surprising part of it was that when the debtor paid his debt, the man who had paid Lincoln $10 in order to gain the $2.50 was very pleased with the settlement. Instead of getting over it, think about what it cost him. It cost him more than he got out of it. How to develop a good attitude? Look at the good side. Learn to get over it. Thirdly, laugh. Laugh often, laugh loud, and laugh long. Doctors tell us that laughter really is good for us. They say that laughter increases our blood flow, that it literally burns calories. I read somebody just this week that said, I read that laughter burns calories, so I'm going to go to the park and sit on the bench and watch all the joggers and laugh. Well, it does, according to doctors, it does burn calories. It does raise and also improve your immune system, according to doctors. It helps with your blood sugar levels. It helps in a lot of things. What happens is that really we breathe faster as we're laughing. And so what happens is we send more oxygen into our blood system, and that goes then into our tissue, into our muscles and different aspects of our body. And we really are physically better off when we laugh. We need to learn to laugh. Laughter is good medicine. A good sense of humor is important. Finish this statement. Laugh and the whole world, I'm sure you finished it, laughs with you. If we learn to take things and maybe make light of them a little bit, laugh at them, we become and have a little bit better positive perspective on these things. Solomon wrote, a merry heart does good, like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Proverbs 17, verse 22. You see, Solomon realized how important it was to have a happy heart. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart, the spirit is broken. Solomon said in Proverbs 15 and verse 13. When you think about it, there are several references to the fact that even God laughed. One, most notably, we were in Psalm 37 a while ago. In Psalm 37, you get down to verse 13. It's talking about the wickedness of man and how man chooses foolishness and how God even laughs at him. God laughs. God has a sense of humor. I had a man back a few years ago that the man had been in the lobby talking, and we would talk and cut up with folks as they would come in, both men and women. And this man took me off to the side. He said, Paul, can you come here for a minute? And I thought, I'm in trouble. And I said, yes, sir, I sure can. And so I walked over to the corner of the foyer where he was. And he said, I just want to commend you. And I want to tell you that I admire your ability to laugh out in public. He said, I've tried several different times through my life. And he said, I just can't do it. I can't laugh, and I can't laugh at or out. And I wish that I could, but I cannot. And I've always found, since that point in time, I've always found that to be a discouraging conversation. I know that it was true. I visited the man on several occasions, talked with him a lot, church building, talked with him in the hospital and all when he was not doing well. And it was true. He couldn't laugh out. He couldn't laugh at life, and yet he wanted to. How do you develop a good positive attitude? Learn to laugh, and learn to laugh out loud and to laugh long. Now, I know some would say, preacher, you laugh too loud. And I've been told that. And I understand. But God's blessed me with a good set of lungs, and it just, when I hear something that tickles my funny bone, it just gets out there before I really realize, I need to tone it down. Yes, I've been told to be quiet in the library before, and yes, I've been told at other places, And I've been looked at. I've been told that when I worked at a congregation in Waverly that I would go into my office, which was in a back hallway, and then I would go into the auditorium and speak to everyone and talk to them. And they said, "We knew you was here. How'd you know I was here? Did you see me drive up? Did you see my car out in the parking lot?" "No, I heard you laughing in the back." Learn to laugh. Laugh loud, laugh long, laugh often. Fourthly, you want to develop a good attitude? Learn to count your blessings and not your troubles. There was an accountant once that tried to figure out and wanted to account for his blessings as opposed to his difficulties. He thought his difficulties far outweighed his blessings. A couple of days later, the preacher saw him at a local store and he said, "Well, hey, how you coming with that list?" And he said, the accountant said, "I quit." He said, "What do you mean you quit?" He said, "When I got to looking at it," he said, "my blessings far outweighed my problems. And so I just quit." We need to learn to count our blessings. What is it that I'd like to know and don't know? I may find out. I may never find out. I may truly know this side of eternity. But there's blessing in whatever happens. And I need to learn to count that blessing. Looking on the good side is not always easy. And looking on the good side allows us to count our blessings. No matter what comes our way, we're able to see the good in it, but we're able to count the blessings from it. Listen to several different verses. Psalm 23 and verse 5. The psalmist says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over." The same psalmist in Psalm 68 verse 19 says, "Blessed be the Lord, daily loads us with benefits." The God of our salvation. Psalm 103 verse 2, the psalmist says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits." Every man should eat and drink, Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 13, and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It is the gift of God. You see, there's not a period there. There was a pause there, but there's not a period. He said every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It's the gift of God. When you count your blessings, what are you doing? You're filling your mind and you're filling your thinking with the good side, as was the first point. But also, you're really seeing what's important. Remember what Paul said in Philippians 4, verses 8 and 9. Remember Paul says, whatever things are true, good, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Paul says, think on the good things. Think on the blessings. Think on what you have, not what you want. Think on what you have, not what others have. Think on what you have and not what you want others to give you. Don't sit and talk about how many troubles you have. Oh, I have this difficulty. I have this pain. I have this ache. I have this hurt. Yes, you do. And they're real. Listen, don't walk away and say, that preacher's discounting my pain and he's discounting my hurt and he's saying, I can't hurt and I don't hurt. No, I'm not saying that at all. Pain is real. It's a real part of our life. And I see with each passing year, with each birthday, the aches and pains mount up more. But also, we need to learn that in them, we need to count our blessings. And so I'll ask you for that point to put a peg right there and remember it and to be back with us again next Sunday morning. But I have one more point that I want to make tonight. And that is, if you want to develop a good, positive attitude, practice the replacement principle. Well, what's the replacement principle? The replacement principle is just that. It's replacing one thing for another. Paul would write to the church at Rome in Romans 12. He's talking about dealing with people. In the very last verse of that chapter, remember, Paul didn't write in chapters now, but the very last verse of what is that chapter for us, Paul says, be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Paul says, don't let evil take up room in your thinking, but take that evil and replace it. Take it out of your mind. Take it out of your thinking and replace it with good. You see, we need to learn to replace anger with love and fear with faith and complaining with gratitude. We need to learn to replace bitterness with forgiveness and judgment with acceptance. And we need to replace the feeling of sorry for ourselves with the idea of how can I help someone else. We need the replacement principle. We need to learn to replace things that are in our life. We need to learn to replace the hurts that are in our life. We need to learn to replace the problems that are in our life with good things. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 18, Jesus reminds us, but those things which proceed from the mouth come from the heart. And those are the things that defile a man. Jesus is teaching the principle of watch your heart. Don't let bitterness, don't let anger, don't let fear, don't let complaining, don't let judgment sit in your heart. Go back and replace it with good things. I might encourage you to go back and read 1 Corinthians 13, beginning in verse 4, and going through verse 7, where Paul talks about love. Love that suffers long and is kind and does not parade itself, is not envy. It suffers long. And he goes on and he talks about all these characteristics of love. Those are things that we need in our life. And those are principles that not only define what love is, but they define how we should live our life. And they truly help you learn, as you concentrate upon those principles, how to put those ideas, those aspects in your life, and replacing then the negative aspects with those good qualities. And so it's important that we fill our hearts with love and replace all the negative things that are part of life with those good things with regards to love. So how do we go about and how do we develop a good attitude? Well, we look on the good side. We get over it. We learn to get over whatever the problem is in our life. In getting over it, we learn to laugh. We laugh often. We laugh loud. We laugh long. We also learn to count our blessings, not our trouble, and practice the replacement plan. That's not easy, I know. But if we will do these things, we'll learn to have a positive attitude. Stories told of a preacher one time that he was always thankful for things. He always had such a good outlook on life. And one day, as everybody came to church, it was freezing outside. It was raining. It was wet. It was stormy. It was a miserable day. Finally, one man said, I'm sure that the preacher today won't find anything that he'll be able to thank God for on this day. But he was in really for a terrible shock. He even thought, though he said, it's terrible, it's horrible outside. The preacher got up, and before he began his sermon, he prayed. And he prayed this: we thank you, O God, that the weather is not always like this. See, It's all in how you look at it. Let's look at it positively. This is the day which the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. May you ever rejoice every day by having this good outlook and this good attitude. We thank you for listening. I hope that you'll be working on that attitude. I know it's challenging. Maybe you're not getting to do all the traditions that you have with your family for Thanksgiving because of COVID, or maybe you're having to just limit your activities, period. I know we have some that don't feel comfortable getting out and coming to worship yet. And, I believe that day's coming soon. It may be 2 or 3 more months, but soon we'll be able to get that vaccine and you'll be able to get out. What a wonderful thing that will be. We will look forward to seeing you. And so we ask you to look forward to that day with great anticipation. There you begin to develop your positive attitude. Hope you have a great week. Until next time, may God bless you and keep you. See you Wednesday night.